Hello everyone, Justin here, and today we're going to be drawing Wally from the movie. And as usual, I always try to rough in the dimensions first, rough in the basic shapes. And in Wally's case, he's basically his body's a cube. So here it is in 3/4 view, and I'll just go ahead and start roughing in his head here, for example, and his neck. Again, basic shapes, trying to get the right dimensions, how they relate to each other, um, and definitely feel free to erase and redo things before you start finalizing some of your lines. So as you notice, I didn't really put any details. And here I'm going to go ahead and start putting in more details, pushing down a little bit harder on the pencil. Again, I'm using a number 2 regular school pencil, and just by pushing down a little bit harder I can put in my final lines. And I don't really worry too much about the initial sketching rough in lines showing, because I'll generally just go over it. If it's way out of line, I'll go ahead and try to erase it. As I go into the picture, I'll add more details, and I usually try to start shading as I go along, and of course later on I'll go back, try to fine tune some things, fix things, uh, try to make the darker areas darker, and try to pull out some highlights using an eraser. I'll try to put in as much detail as I can, but I try not to dwell on it too long. So in a sense, this is really a sketch, and some of the details are just suggested, and the viewer's mind will automatically imagine some of the other details that I don't put in. Okay, so with this particular view, certain lines are going to be parallel to each other, like the front of his body, the cube, and the bottom, as well as the lines that form the bottoms and the tops of the his his tracks. So his claws here again are just a extension of a cube, and I'll go ahead and shade the one side just to give it more depth and shape. Here I made it a little bit darker. Now when I shade, sometimes I'll try to keep the pencil lines in the same direction, but really other times I'll just go ahead and go do whatever, which way. If I'm really trying to do a more realistic or hyper realistic drawing, of course I will pay attention to that more, blend in the pencil lines as much as possible so it's much smoother, and try to minimize the visibility of the pencil strokes. Again, here's his left claw or hand, and again just a lot of rectangles, cubical shapes. The tricky part here are the foreshortened, like the arm here is kind of a tube, so you have to shade it such that it looks like a tube, something round, curved surfaces, whereas his right arm is a rectangular slab. And you can see the bottom of his arm is just one solid shade, a dark shade. Trying to put in some more details, like the seams on his body. And generally, I try to, even when I shade, I'll do the shading lightly at first, and then as I finalize, I'll continue the different shading with the lights and the darks, but just more pronounced, and that just makes it stick out more, show more contrast. Alright, so here's one of the wheels of his tracks, and you can see the slightly angled line there that I drew and the cross, and that just helps me identify the angle that I'll need to draw the oval for the wheel. His tracks or legs have a lot of detail, and I'm not going to be particular about the exact number of parts or too much detail here. So I'm just suggesting the tracks and the details without spending too much time on those. And a lot of this bottom part here of his left track is going to be in shadow. So again, I'm not going to be putting too much detail here. Just enough to let the viewer see that they're tracks just like on a military tank. So up to this point, I'm about probably 8 minutes in, 10 minutes or so into this drawing. If you're curious, I actually have this sped up at 2 times the regular speed. Alright, so more detail. Now the inside of the tracks are going to be in shadow, so I'm just going to try to fill this in as much as I can without too much detail. I will often do a drawing with just one pencil, not really caring to switch between, but again, like I said, I will use other pencils if I want to make it darker, give it more contrast, and I will use softer lead pencils. Here I'm just using a blending stump to smooth things out. Again, there's the cylinder left arm, and I'm gonna put in, lightly suggest a shadow underneath Wally, just so it doesn't look like he's just floating. Alright, and I'll just go through the whole drawing, kind of blend things out a little bit, put some more shade, make it a little bit more three-dimensional. Just be careful with using this, because as you use a blending stump, more and more lead gets built up on the tip, and if you go over an area that you want to be a little bit lighter, it'll be unexpectedly darker than what you thought. Looking at this drawing at this point, it almost looks a little bit too flat. But again, the whole gist of this was really to show you that you need to try to get in the rough shapes in first, and then you can always add detail later. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.